I want to create a space that brings the filmmaking community back together. I want to create a hub that allows filmmakers to reintroduce themselves to this community and to the industry. And that way we can all get to know each other more than just as professionals, but as humans. We're going to be diving into a lot of questions that are just not based off of what camera you use or what gear you use, but how do you think and why do you do what you do? This is why we're doing this. Well, welcome to Apple Box Podcast. My name is Danny Lau, cinematographer, producer, and director based out of Toronto, Canada, and I'm here with my co-host, producer, and photographer, Anthony Valtsinis. Let's do this. So this is our very first episode of the Apple Box Podcast. I am your host, Danny Lau, and this is Anthony Valtsinis.
Yep.
That's your always intro. Yep. And we started Fashion Media. Podcast here is kind of one of our things that we're doing under Faction to hopefully connect the community and bring everyone together. This is something that took some investment and some time to put into this, but I think one of the common things that me and Anthony have in our career is our ability to connect with people. Anthony's the master of connecting to people.
I would say the master.
You attract a lot of people,
What can I say?
And in my career, I'll start with me in my career coming up, as an introvert, as somebody who was very shy, didn't really talk to a lot of people, it was very difficult for me to connect with people, right? And I had to find that in me, to find a way to how do I say hi to people? How do I tell people, hey, I'm a videographer, or at that time a videographer or a filmmaker, and be like, hey, this is what I am. And I found that my biggest challenge was I was intimidated by people's work. I'd see their profiles and look at them and be like, oh, he'll never talk to me. He's too good for me. He's too this. And I started to realize as I come up in this industry, I'm like, that's just so stupid. You start to realize how much people actually want to help each other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we kind of met in a lot of ways. We just kind of like, we liked each other's work, and it's like, well, if I never say hi to Anthony, we wouldn't be here. We would never work together.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So it's very important to find courage to connect with people. And I think that this podcast, I want it to be the introductory friend, the person who says, hey, welcome to Apple Box Podcast. You might know me, you might see my face all the time, but here, meet,
Insert guest.
And we're going to have lots of guests in here, people that I look up to, people that, can help and service a lot of other people in this industry. And it won't just be DPs. I know you can see a lot of DPs in there because that's my crowd.
Yeah.
But also every other department, whether you are a brand new beginner and perhaps you're listening to two DPs talk and you don't understand what the hell they're talking about, but there will be somebody who perhaps can speak your language, whether it's a wedding videographer or someone who's doing social media and working with agencies and connecting in that way. So I think it's really important to connect.
Yeah. We're going to have a variety of different people here because the industry is so broad, right?
Yeah.
Agency owners, entry-level shooters, there's a whole range, obviously cinematographers, and the goal is to, like you said, connect creators and people in the industry together with our audience, whatever that audience might be.
Yeah.
Which is probably, 5
we'll find
people.
out.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
And also to be informative and somewhat entertaining, but really it's like an education and an insight into, the inner workings of what goes on in this industry, I think.
Yeah, and me and you are going to speak on a couple episodes. Probably thinking of doing that first for you guys to kind of get to know us, right? For people to kind of get to know us and see where we're coming from,
who we are,
who we are,
yeah.
Exactly, right? And I think that's the idea is very important that we create a community. And I think with everything that happened in the last 2 years, people have gotten disconnected, or people have felt very isolated, and I think it's really important that we come back out and build this community again. I feel, at least in Toronto, there isn't a hub to do that, and I want this to be the hub to do that. I want people to realize, hey, there's another DP just like me, and perhaps that's work that he or she does that you're like, oh my God, that's really, really good. But then you hear their story and you're like, I can relate to this person.
Yeah.
I feel I can connect to this person. So maybe I'll drop a DM and probably be like, hey, I saw you on the podcast. We'd love to work with you.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to also there's people that you admire. You see their work on Instagram. That's kind of what it is, just like a portfolio in some capacity. Not everyone's showing behind the scenes and talking on their stories and all this influencer type stuff.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool to see, oh, I know so-and-so through their work. Now I get to know them on a personal level. I can connect with them. I can pick apart their story and be like, oh, I can relate to this. Or now they're a person. They're not just a figure.
Yeah, exactly. They're not just a public figure that you're seeing on your phone screen.
Yeah.
Right. And I know for me, it's like, you know, the guests that we're about to have on that you're about to see, you start to realize they're all just human. And I think that's a very important aspect of things, that you're going to see that everyone else, just like myself, just like you, want to work with good humans. They want to work with good people, not just talented people, but good people.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see through this that you're going to meet people and you're going to realize, hey, this is he or she's a really good person.
Unless we have an asshole on the podcast, that could be kind of
That would be
interesting.
fascinating.
Yeah. They probably want
Maybe some people like assholes.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Like, I like the personality and I can work with that.
But maybe an asshole won't come into a storage unit with blue lights.
That's true.
And shoot with two schmucks. Like that. But
it's possible.
who knows? That'd be cool.
Who knows? Yeah. And so that's the whole goal of this podcast. The podcast is not, like I told Anthony, it's like, this is not meant to be viral. If it goes, great. But I'm not meant to reach a large crowd. This is a mission-based podcast. An informational-based podcast.
Yeah, it's also intimate, and the industry it's big, but it's also kind of small. Especially in Toronto, it's like so everyone kind of knows everyone.
It's like a small world.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool to sit down and just talk to people who are in the same industry and connect, and whatever happens to it, cool. Like,
yeah, exactly. And we realize that too. Even having guests like, oh, you know, blah blah blah. How do you know blah blah blah?
Yeah.
And it just becomes like, oh, okay, everyone knows each other. And I think this is a great way for people to get to know each other on a more intimate level, which allows you to work faster, which allows you to skip that, I don't know, initial stage of like small talk, if you will. And you just kind of get, like at least that's what it is for me, right? Like you don't have to go in and be like, hi, and Danny, and like, let me bring out the coffee and let's go out for lunch. And then like you're bringing a bunch of people on dates essentially. You get to kind of hopefully skip that stage.
I mean, I never had a cup of coffee in my life, so going like, oh, let's go out for coffee. I'm pretty much useless in those scenarios. I'll get a water, but then it's like, what are you getting a water for, bro? Come on.
But I it's true. This guy goes and gets.
But
water
usually I'll
and
bring my
coffee.
own water bottle.
It's,
like,
it makes it
I'm
even
good.
worse.
Yeah.
So,
I'll get like a scone or something.
But like, you guys are gonna preview who Anthony is. It's. I think it's. Like you said, this is what we're doing here. Like you hear Anthony talk right now, it's more than just what you see on his profile, which at this point I think has nothing on it.
I did archive everything.
You archived everything, so it's gonna be hard to know who Anthony is.
Unidentifiable.
Right? And it's not just based off of reference, you get to see for yourself. But the things that you're gonna learn in this podcast, I think are really important too. I think we touch on a lot of topics. We went through production. This is not the first podcast we're filming. This will be the first podcast we're releasing. But I think you're going to learn like advice. You're going to learn, if you're new, you're going to learn advice from some of the industry people who are
killing it.
Yeah, they're doing crazy stuff. You're going to learn practical advice, technical advice even, and inspirational advice.
Mental mindset.
So we do touch on story because it's important that we relate to everybody, and everybody has a story in this industry. Mm-hmm. And then we touch on technical things like what are the approach of people for work. So if it's a DP, what's your strategy? What's your philosophy in work? And then we get into mental. We talk about, mindset and what's important to keep you going in this industry. I think you're going to find it fascinating for everyone that watches this, just the relatable and how common people's answers are.
Yeah. It's pretty simple when you think about it. You think it's such a complicated industry, and like at the end of the day, it boils down to pretty fundamental things, and you'll realize that as you watch the episodes. And every person's different, which is cool. Like everyone's story, which is what I connect with. It's like, okay, we're all like at a certain level, but like how everyone got here is so vast and varied, and it's like, whoa, like your story is kind of crazy. So,
yeah, and a lot of times we have as artists, we have a common thing where we define ourselves by our level of work. Yeah, like I belong in this tier, and then blah 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 belongs in this tier. I think this humanizes it all. Mm-hmm. It makes you realize that if you don't think you're up to par with somebody else's work or whatever you want to view it as, that it's not that hard to just message them and be like, hey, like I want to learn, and how can I get there? And then perhaps this can help you understand, okay, I really like so-and-so's philosophy and the style, and I like their approach, and I like the way they talk, which is very important. We get to a couple of guests I find so far that at least we've had that are very fascinating, that I'm surprised, at some of their answers, like, oh, like your work looks amazing, but
Yeah.
perhaps the approach was completely opposite of what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
So
It's unique. You don't know who, like, what you see on Instagram is just fucking,
yeah,
you can swear. We can swear.
yeah.
It's just like 1% of what like a human is.
It really is.
It's like the classic iceberg meme.
Yeah.
Right? It's like there's so much more going on, and it also makes it a lot more like it makes it easier. Like
Yeah.
when you're intimidated, you feel like someone's at this high echelon and like almost
Yeah.
like untouchable. But then, like you said, it humanizes people, and it's like, oh, like you're just another guy. And
And when you do that, you allow yourself to grow. You allow yourself to like put yourself in position to grow.
yeah,
Like,
I
you're
feel
not
like you're able to.
scared. Yeah, you kill the initial fear of meeting somebody.
Yeah,
And I think that's going to be big. So I think we're going to see some of the people's work, especially the DPs and directors, right?
Yeah.
Not everyone has work. Some people work in different positions. Perhaps they're founders of agencies and things like that. And we do want to dive into like agency roles and their mindset and their perspective of things, but also perhaps even someone, what if it's like an art director or something like that? Something where we can go into every little bit, because everyone's always looking for somebody. Hopefully, every people can find their team through this community and find a place to meet everybody. So yeah, that's the whole point of this podcast.
that's the gist of it, I think.
That's the gist of it. The Apple Box Podcast. Now, the one thing I'll end off on is how the Apple Box Podcast became the Apple Box Podcast.
Yes.
The truth is, I looked around and I was sitting here. I was like, "What do I call this podcast?" I saw an Apple Box. And I'm like, "Apple Box Podcast."
It's that simple.
It doesn't. We don't have to get. It doesn't have to be that deep.
No, it doesn't have to be.
But it does have similar meaning in a sense that the Apple Box is a universal, tool in the industry, probably the most known. And if you can imagine a bunch of crew members sitting on Apple Boxes talking to each other, whether it's in break or before a shoot or after a shoot or whatever, that's what it represents at the end of the day.
That's it. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So,
So that's what this is. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy these episodes. Me and Anthony will be hopefully, bringing in a lot of value and a lot of people who can bring that value. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy it.
yeah, it's gonna be a fun one.
Sick.
It's gonna be a ride. We never know how to end these, but this is how we're ending
That's
it.
the best
so,
part. I should
it.
leave all the cuts like at the end very awkward.
100%. Just let it fade out. Awkwardly.
Just let it fade out. It's
We'll look into the
awkward.
cameras.
Yeah, exactly.
So.